So yeah, a software framework is essentially a specific methodology of how to do specific things. It can be anything. It's not necessarily related to just software. It's can be like, all right, what's the framework to do these specifics, like to build a building. I'm just looking at a building, and I'm sure there's a very specific set of steps on how to do that. And if you follow those steps, you'll have a building eventually. Well, like Django or a framework also is just kind of like I like to say it's an ethos. It's a way a group of people came together and thought, hey, this is what we think the best way to do this is. And we're going to build a framework that operates within whatever those developers like essentially. Yeah, just went blank right there. Essentially how it implements how these developers want this thing to work. A framework consists of multiple libraries. So there's libraries, there's modules, and then there's frameworks. A framework more often than not has many different modules or libraries associated with it. And there's many different frameworks out there. Django is one of them. I think Rails is one of them, or Ruby on Rails has, I think, one. There's Flask. That's a framework. You have front end frameworks, React, Angular. People call React a library. It is a library. However, most often than not, you're going to be needing additional libraries for that to work. So essentially, a bunch of Python developers said, hey, we're building these front end applications, these full stack web applications so often. Let's build a framework that allows us to get a full stack application up and running with the core features and core capabilities that almost all full stack applications require. And let's package that up into a framework. And that framework is called Django. What questions do you have?
Hopefully I like this more than Angular.
Well, Angular is specifically the front end. So hopefully you like React better than Angular. Yeah. So I'm just going to kind of quickly review where we were and where we're going. So last week we used SQL and Postgres. The past 3 days we just interacted with Django's ORM, and today we're actually going to be building a full stack Django application that has all the CRUDing capabilities: creating, reading, update, and deleting from a database. All right. So let's just go ahead and put some code on the screen. So everyone should be pretty familiar with starting a Django app or a Django project as well as an app. So what's the first thing I need to do?
Create a virtual environment.
Yep. Python-make venv. I'm going to call it virtual environment or venv. I'm going to activate that environment. Great. All right. So I'm going to create a simple project just called my site. I'm just going to create a site. That's just what I'm going to call it. So I created a virtual environment. Now what's next?
Requirements, if you have any.
So I'm creating this one from scratch.
Don't you have to install Django?
Yep. Pip install Django. And I'm going to use a Postgres database for this. So if I am going to be using a Postgres database, what else should I install?
It was a Scicop G2.
Yep. Scicop G2. So I'm in my virtual environment, installing Django, installing Scicop G2. All right, so I'm going to clear the terminal. I'm going to list everything out. I've just got my virtual environment, which I'm currently in. So now I'm going to make a Django project just called my site. Django-admin start project my site. And if I open up the Explorer, I can see my site come in here. I don't like this nested. So how do I go about and unnest these if I create it from scratch?
I believe you just put a period after the end of creating it.
Yep. So Django -admin space start project, my site space period. And there we've got my site and we have this manage.py file. So this manage.py file is the entry point to your Django app. So you always write Python manage.py followed by additional commands. You'll never want to mess with this file ever. So inside of our my site project, we've got a few files. Most of them we'll rarely ever touch. We have this ASGY file and we have this WSGI file. So web server gateway interface, and you'll never mess with these. I think it's just like what web servers allow you to access with regards to Django. Not quite sure. I don't really touch them ever. Now we have our settings.py file. This has all our configuration settings for our Django project, as well as any apps as well. So we'll be doing some configuration in here as we continue to build upon our Django app or our Django project's complexity. So we have like secret key, debug, allowed hosts, installed applications, malware, root config, templates. So we have got database. This is where we change our database. Auth passwords validators. So as I mentioned, Django already has a lot of built-in functionality. It does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So it also has like an admin panel that most applications need. So for just like the administrators of the application, this kind of has some password validation already built into it, and just some other additional settings. And then we also have the URLs file. So this is essentially where we write our routes for our application. Like if you go to www.something.com/ and we already have our routes. Notice how we already have an admin route in here because Django already has a built-in admin portal or an admin dashboard. All right. Questions? All right. So we're going to create a site that just polls some stuff. So we're able to start a poll and you're able to like ask questions and vote on them as well. So if I wanted to start a new Django app, what's the command to do so?
It's
We
Django and
startup.
Start app.
Python manage.py start app. Uh-oh. What happened?
The space.
Oh, I just said start app. So I'm going to start app. I'm going to call it polls. And here we have our polls application. And we should already be pretty familiar with the migrations directory, which has all of our migration scripts. And we should already be pretty familiar with our models directory or models file where we actually write the models or the tables for our database. All right. So the first thing we'll go ahead and do is let's just try to get something printed on the screen just right away.
So quick question, with the migrations, the folder is underneath polls. So will there be a different migration folder for each app that you will have to specify? Okay.
Correct.
And that's every time that you change something in any of the files, then you run it through manage py through migrations.
If you change any of the models, like, yeah, if you alter any of the models, you'll have to make migrations.
Got it.
And then migrate.
So is that anything interacting with the database then? You'll have to make the migrations?
Wait, what was that question?
Is that anything interacting with the database? That's when you make migrations in order to make that permanent, or?
So yeah, when you make migrations, you create the script for when that script is ran, it actually changes the database.
Okay, got it. Makes sense.
So to use Django, you need both a project and at least one app.
To get the full, yes, pretty much. Like you can literally just use Django for the admin dashboard, but that really doesn't provide any value for you. But yes, you always want to have at least one app in your Django project. All right. So let's kind of go through the data when coming through. Yeah, let's just run this Python manage.py run server. So this is actually starting the server, and you'll be able to access this in your web browser. Python manage.py run server. And notice it says, hey, you have 18 unapplied migrations. These are the built-in migrations that already come with Django. Your project may not work properly until you apply the migrations, etc. So if I come over here and go to localhost, 8,000, not 3,000. Here, this is the installed worked successfully. Congratulations. So this is the landing page for a Django application. And it's got links down here. But let's go ahead and actually create some front end. Let's create like a page where we can actually display something on the front end. So what that does, so we come into here. So this is just where the data flows. The first thing it's going to come through is this WSGI file. It turns HTTP requests into Python objects, and it goes through the urls.py file. So it first comes into the my site, and then it goes to the urls.py file, and then it looks at the URL you're going to, and then it'll say like, all right, it matched admin, run this code. And then once that runs that code, it'll come here, and then wherever this URL points to, whatever view it points to, it'll come into here, but let's go ahead and do that. So in the my site URLs directory, we're going to go ahead and create a polls. We want to go to a path called polls / and I want to include the polls.urls file. So I need to include the polls. So I'm going to have to import include from the URLs. But now it says no module found, no module named polls.urls. So I need to go into my polls app and create a URLs file. URLs, what the hell's going on? urls.py. So in my Django project URLs file, it's coming into here, and I want to go to polls. So if I go to /polls/ nothing shows up, but I want something to show up. So it comes into here. And again, this is in my Django project URLs file. And I'm saying, hey, now go look in the URLs file within the polls app, within my Django app. So in my Django app, I'm going to have to import Django.urls import path, very similar to what I'm doing here. And I'm going to have to do URL patterns essentially just mimicking this. Oh. So I'm going to go path, and I'm not going to, I don't want to go to anything after this. So I'm not going to add anything after this one. So imports path. And if I just go to / nothing, go to polls / nothing right up here, I want to point to my views directory. So I'm going to import views, or import everything from the views directory. And in my views directory, I don't have anything yet, so I'm going to have to create some views. So inside my views, I'm going to create a view method, or a method called index, like so. And I'm going to save that. So views is not defined. It should be defined. Oh, from import. And then this is from, there we go. So let's just run that.
Shouldn't that be from views import dot?
No, I can do from just dot import the entire views thing, the entire views, but I could also do views import star, but then I wouldn't need this.
When you say from dot, where is it looking?
In the same directory, in the current directory.
Okay, so and it's just importing everything as views.
Yep. So now notice how it says I'm getting an error. So it's saying views.index module polls views has no attribute index. So it's coming into my views directory and it's not showing anything. So if I look here, it routed me to first polls / nothing. So if you look up here, polls / nothing, polls / nothing. There's nothing comes after the polls / and it's saying, hey, look in the views.index directory, or index, look for a method called index within the views file. I'm coming over here, and in here there is no method called views, or method called index. So in here, I'm going to create an indexed method that takes in a request, and I want it to return an HTTP response to the front end. I can't just return just an arbitrary string, because like we're using an HTTP, so we specifically have to format headers, all of that stuff, and send it to the browser. We can't just return a string. So I need to import Django.http, import HTTP response. I keep doing that from. And so here I can return an HTTP response. And now I can say like, hello, Oscar Platoon. Oh, does not appear to have any pattern in it. You see a valid pattern file that usually issues called by circular import. Where is it happening? Is that request? Polls.urls. Polls.urls. Just see. Import path.
What's the difference between the project URLs.py and the app URLs.py?
This is just where it first looks first in the project URLs. That's just the first route it looks at in that URLs file, and then it, hey, what where do you want me to look from there? So you can essentially keep chaining on. All right, what's going on here? Circular. What is happening? Include polls.urls. So I'm just improperly configured. Init. Oh. Yep, there we go. URL patterns needs to be plural. So now I'm not getting any errors. I'm just getting this warning. So now if I click here and go to here, whoa, I get hello Oscar Platoon. So if we look at here, like where the data it's coming in, it's going to our URLs, the router, which then points us to what view, what method we want to run in our views file. And then from there, we can access our database, and then we can come up and eventually build out templates to display something. What questions do you have? So first came into the urls.py project URLs full file, tried to find a URL pattern that matches one of these. So it found polls up here. It found, hey, there's polls. Let's go into here. And all right, now let's look into our app, our polls app URLs file. So we had to manually create the urls.py file in our app. And it's saying, hey, anything after polls, let's see if there's anything that comes after polls that match this pattern. All right, there is one because polls / there's nothing there. There's nothing that comes after that / All right, look in the views file, comes and look for an index method, comes over here, finds an index method and returns an HTTP response called hello Oscar Platoon. What questions do you have? So goes from the project URLs file to the apps URLs file to the views.
And the views is inside the app as well.
Correct. It's on the same level as your models directory or models file. All right. All right, let's go ahead and now let's set up a database. So I'm going to clear this terminal. And what should we call this database? Let's just call it my site. Or let's call it polls. So I'm going to create DB polls. All right, so I created a DB database called polls. Now I need to connect this database to my Django project by going all the way down to the databases inside of settings and make it sure it's a Postgres QL. And I'm going to make this one called polls. I'm going to delete this right here. All right. Clear. So let's go ahead and run that server again. Okay, we have 18 unapplied migrations. That's totally fine for right now because we haven't built out our backend yet. So now let's go ahead and build out some models. So in here, I'm just going to have two tables, a question and a choice table. So I'm going to create a class called question, or a table called question, or a model called question. Models.model. And this is going to have a question text equals models dot char field, and let's just make this a max length of 255. And let's do a publish date, pub date. Pub date, so like a publication date, and models dot date time field, and just call it the name of it, date published. So we have a questions table. Now let's go ahead and create a choice table. Class choice, models.model. And here we're going to have a question like what choice does this question belong to? So this is where we have just a one-to-many by just doing a foreign key question on delete models dot cascade, and the related name is choices. So if we go from question to see how many choices there are associated with that question, I can get all those choices. Next, I'm going to say choice text to see like what that text looks like. Models dot char field, max length. Let's make it 200. All right. And last, we can say votes. So how many votes has this choice received? Because we are creating a polls. So integer field. We can add a default value of 0. So right when someone creates a choice, the default value is 0. What questions do you have about creating the models? So this is no different than creating a poll, like a Slack poll, like what challenge would you like me to review? And the choices would be, you know, Amazon, Medium, IMDb. And you can vote at those choices.
The string inside the date time field on line 7, is that just what the database displays it as?
Yeah, I think if I do that, date time field, it's just a verb, whatever it looks like when it's displayed, I believe. Published. But you don't need to have that. All right. All right, next, I'm going to add my polls. Did this work without me adding the polls to it? That's interesting. Oh, I know why. Because it doesn't necessarily need to unless you have a database, I guess. All right. So in my settings, I added the polls Django project to my settings. What's the next thing I need to do? If I wanted to apply these tables to my polls database.
Did you already create a database?
Yep. So I can PSQL polls, and I can see right there, I didn't have any relations yet.
Do you need to make some
Migrate.
migrations?
Yep. Thank you. So I need a Python manage.py make migrations. And I'm just going to make migrations for the polls app. So if I come under migrations, I don't have any migrations yet. Migration scripts created yet. So it created the question model as well as the choice model. And we can see right here in my Explorer that it created that initial migration script. Next, I want to apply those migrations. It's only for the polls app. I don't want to do it for the entire app yet or the entire project yet, just because I don't need to use those yet. But in the future, in the coming days, we'll kind of show you what those look like. Python manage.py, we want to migrate the polls script. We want to run that script and actually apply these question and choice models to our database. There we go. You should all be pretty familiar with that. Now I'll just kind of show you. I know I kind of showed you before this little app called Postico. If I want to go down and see my polls, my polls database, I've got the polls choices. So I've got the ID, choice text, votes, and question ID, and the polls question with the ID of text or question text and public date. You kind of see how they're associated right there.
How do we want to go about installing Postico?
I'll provide you the link to it after the lecture. And if you have issues running it or getting it set up, we'll troubleshoot it with you. But it's not required. It's just kind of nice to have to visually see what's going on. All right. Next, I'm gonna pip install Django extensions, just so I can manually populate the database with some stuff. Pip install Django extensions. Uh-oh. What just happened?
You only
Django
want one?
extensions. All right. Guess that's already satisfied. So now I need to add the Django extensions, Django _ extensions to my installed apps. So just like I was interacting with the database from the terminal, I'm going to do Python manage.py shell plus here. Great. Now let's go ahead and see if we can grab, create some stuff for the database. So I'm going to do Q1, question 1, question. Let's look at my models again, just to make sure I've got the question. So question text equals how's it going? And the pub date, oh, this might be a little difficult. Pub date equals, yeah, what's the date? Date time field. I'm not quite sure. Django.
Isn't it year, month, day?
I believe so.
Let's look. I don't know. Is it year, month, day, you said?
Yeah, it'd be quote
I think it was back at the top.
4-digit year hyphen month hyphen day.
Like so? Year, month, day. All right.
Yeah.
So I'll just do not 2006, 2021. It is July 1st. Can't believe over half the year is already gone.
Which is
All right.
crazy.
Let's save that. So I just want to see if Q1 worked. All right, we have an object. Now if I do save, hopefully it worked. No, it did not work. With that, I'm going to do from Django.utils import time zone and pub date equals time zone dot now. Hopefully that works. Q1 dot save. There we go. So now I can like see Q1 dot question text. How's it going? Q1 dot pub date. That's, I guess, the time zone, what it looks like. That's nasty. I can also do you know, q1.id. Oh, interesting. So that's like, all right, well, I'm going to go look in my database, just manually come into here. It's probably going to have two fields. So it looks like it did still push it in. So I've got two of them that are, how's it going? I'm just going to delete one of those rows from there. All right. So yeah, I think that's it. Just got one for right now. All right. So if I wanted this to be formatted correctly or formatted nicely, I can also do the dunder string method, take in the self keyword and return, do an F string like ID, self.id, question, question text, and then date. It's going to look really nasty though. Pub date. All right. So now let's create some choices. Let's go back into Shell Plus. I'm going to say question or Q1 equals question dot objects dot first. So I just want to make sure I've got the, all right, cool. I've got the question. Now I can go ahead and create a couple of choices. Q1 dot choices, because I'm able to access choices. I'm going to go ahead and create a choice. Choice text equals great. And votes equals 0. Cool, created one choice. Let's create another choice. Okay. And not doing so well. So now I can do like q1.choices.all. And out there, I've got 3 choices right there. And I can also do the dunder string method for that. Choice text, and votes. Votes. Now, if I run that again, you probably have to exit out of it, but yeah, you get the idea. Questions so far about just creating the tables? All right.
Now, is there, because you're creating them all in terminal SQL, but would it make sense to do it in an SQL file just to see like what you've all created as things get bigger, or would you normally just create it in the terminal?
It depends on, like, just for this example, I'm just creating it in the terminal because it's super easy. But if you're creating a bunch of them, you'll probably have a seed file. It could be in SQL or a Python script that kind of creates a bunch of them. Yeah. All right. All right. So let's just quickly review. We created inside of our project URLs, we created a polls. So it's looking for a URL pattern for polls. If it matches it, it says, hey, look in the app polls URLs file, which we did, and find any matching patterns that comes after polls /. And we did. We created a views.index file, or views.index method. And in our index method, takes in a request, and we just return an HTTP response called hello Oscar Platoon. So let's go ahead and create a few more paths, a few more URLs. So in addition to the views.index, I'm going to add another argument in here called name, and I'm going to call that index as well. And this will come in handy later. It's literally for naming routes when you're navigating between pages. So with that, let's go ahead and create another path. Whoop. And whoop. When I go to polls/1, I want to see the choice for that poll, like that poll, that question, and the choices. So if I go to polls/ and I need to, I can hard code one there, but no, I want it to be dynamic, because what if I have a bunch of questions and I have like, you know, a bunch of questions. I want to go to like either 1 or 101 or 115. So in here, for this route, I want it to be able to accept an integer, and the integer should be associated with this model's question ID. So I can say question underscore ID, and that view is going to essentially going to be the detail view. It should display the view or the question detail. So like the question text, etc. So I'm going to call that a detail. And again, I'm going to also add another name.
Don't you have to close the angle bracket?
Yep, thank you. And I'm going to need views right there as well. So if I go to like polls/1, polls/2, it's going to come into here and look at that detail. So I'm going to come over here and create a detail method, def detail, that takes in a request, and comes over here. Should display question and then the ID. So here I need to find out what question I should show in this detail. So in this detail method, I need to take in a question ID, which is associated with whatever this path is called. So I should probably make it dynamic and return F string and question ID. So if I come over here and click, I need to run the server, Python manage.py, run server. All right, server is running. I go to polls, it says hello Oscar Platoon. If I go to poll/1, it said should display question 1. If I say, hey, go to that URL, 574 blah, 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 it should display question blah, blah, blah with the ID of that. What questions do you have about displaying a detail, like a question detail?
So quick question, just for, I guess, organizational standpoint, would it be, I guess, better to write the, I guess, method in the views page first and the URLs, just so you can follow along better, or does it really matter?
That's up to you, is how you feel. So I like to go from you write the URL, then write the view, and then write the template, the front end. So it essentially follows this. All right, write the URL, write the view, and then we're going to eventually write the template. That's kind of how I think of it.
Gotcha.
But it's up to you. All right, let's go ahead and create a couple more routes. So instead of the question, I want to get the results of that poll. So I'm going to do question ID results. So whatever the results are for that question. And so instead of detail, I'm going to do results. And lastly, I'm going to need to be able to vote on that poll. So I'm going to do question ID / vote, and views / vote. So I created 2 additional routes, question ID / results that should display the results of this question, as well as the vote question ID / vote, which allows me to vote on that question. So inside of details, I'm going to also have to create a results method that also takes in the question ID, which is associated with that route, and just should display results of question blah, whatever that question is. And vote, I should create a method called vote over here inside my views vote, which also takes a question ID. I'm voting on question blah, 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 blah. So if I come over here and I go to 1, should display question 1. If I go to / results, I should display the results of question 1. And if I do vote for question 1, I'm voting on question 1. All right. So with that, now I'm going to have to, like, using this HTTP response, I don't really have any formatting. I can't do anything like with regards to like increase the size, or I can't like write all my HTML. This literally just returns a string to the front end. But I'm going to want to create a HTML files that display when I go to these various different views. So in order to do that, I need to create, if I come over here, I'm in my views. Now I need to create templates. So this is going to handle all the presentation layer, what I see on the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and inside my polls app, I'm going to create another directory called templates. And then inside of my templates directory, I'm going to create a directory called polls. And this is just called polls because it's associated with the polls app. And then with inside of the polls app, I'm going to create a, what should I create? I'm just going to create an index.html like so. And yeah, that should be fine. So I'm just going to create an index.html polls. All right.
Quick question for the folder structure. Would you need to specify polls considering templates is within the application polls? Or would you have another, like, would you put another templates? Would you house all your templates in that, even if it's for another application?
No, if it's for another application, it will be in its like another app's templates folder.
Okay.
Yep.
I guess what would be the case of having like something other than polls within that template?
I don't know if you'd, I mean, I'm sure there might be a case where you might, but you probably won't encounter it in here. You will encounter having templates within your project at some point in the future,
Got it.
but we'll get to that.
What did you go over in the views folder? I was busy copying the URLs.
All right, yeah, all right. So inside the views, so I created 3 additional URLs. Detail URL that should show the question detail information, the question ID followed by results that should show the results of that poll, as well as /vote, question ID /vote that should allow me to vote on that poll. So I created the corresponding views or the methods associated with each URL. So the detail should display all the question, display question ID. The results should display the results of that question ID, and the vote should display it should just say like, it should allow me to vote on that question.
All right, I thought you had gone into the models or some other file before.
Nope, haven't touched that. And so if I go to just /polls, I want to view all the polls. So with that, let's go into my index. Should display all the polls. So I can do that. I don't necessarily need all of this, but it's just good practice to have the head and everything in here. So there's I just want to see if Jinja comes in. All right. So Django comes with something called Jinja 2, I believe, or it's just called Jinja, which allows us to inject Python code into our HTML files. That allows us to like run if statements, for loops, and display various just various data to make our web application a little more dynamic. So with that, all polls, in order to inject Python code into our template, we need to do curly braces followed by a %sign. And in here, I'm going to write an if statement. I'm going to say, hey, if polls list. So at some point, I'm going to have to pass in polls list into this template somehow. And then anytime you create an if statement, you need to have an end, kind of like an end if statement. So you have to explicitly say, hey, when does this if statement end? So end if. So if there's a polls list or a question list, that's what I should want. Question list. I want to list all the polls. So with that, I'm going to create an ordered list within here, or yeah, an unordered list. And this question list is, again, it's going to be a list of questions. And so I need to loop through those questions and display them in a list somehow. So if there's a questions list, I'm going to say, hey, for question in question underscore list. And then again in here, I'm going to need an N4. I just want to list, let's see, just the question underscore text. And I'll kind of show you. So I created this HTML template, but now I need to actually render that template when I go to the index.html, or I'm sorry, the index view method. So instead of using the HTTP response, we're going to import something called render, which is already imported for us. So if it's going to render the request, and then also where that HTML template is located at, as well as some data that I'm going to pass in. So if I come over here, hopefully it works. I've got all polls showing up, but I'm not passing any data into, let's bring that index.html template over there. But I'm not passing any data. I'm not passing a question list in there. So what do I need to do in order to grab all the questions from the database? Can anybody think of like, how do I grab all the questions from the database? You've done this
Wouldn't
on Monday.
wouldn't that be a select statement?
Yep. So how would I go about doing that? So question list.
Psycho PG2.
What question.objects at all?
Yep. So question.objects.all. But it looks like question is not defined. So I'm going to have to import my model, my question model in here. So from .models, I'm going to import just the question model. So I've got this question list. And when I pass data into my index.html file, my template, it needs to be an object. So right here, I'm passing in an empty object. So right here, I'm just going to say, I'm going to let data equal question list equals question list. I'm sorry, question list colon question list. And now I'm going to pass this data object into this HTML template. So now this data object has a key called question list, and this question list should be a query set of objects. So I can actually print question list like so. If I refresh, notice how down here, I've got that query set with an array of questions. And I'm just printing that right here. Now I'm assigning that array of queries, the array of questions to this questions list. And I'm passing that into here. So now that, and I can also print the data. Kind of see right here. What is this? Query set. Looks like there's two of them in here. Oh, that's why. So there's my question list object. It has a key of question list, and it's got a query set, which is an array of questions. Now it's being passed into here and saying, hey, if there's a question list exists, create an unordered list, and it loop through that question. So for question in question list, this is just kind of like basic Python. Create a list element and display the question text. And now if I come over here, you can kind of see what that looks like. I can also make this an H1. Or let's do, there we go. Does that make sense?
That's pretty cool.
All right. So, but ideally, I'd want to click on this link, like click on this and have it go to should display question 1 and have it actually display question 1. So instead of having this H3 tag here, I'm going to make it an A tag and have it go to href colon. I want it to go to polls / question.id. And let's do a / there as well.
You mean question?
Yep. So let's see if this works. So now it's a link. If I click, how's it going? It should go to polls / 1. Sweet. Look, it went to polls / 1. Uh-oh, but it looks like something is different. So page not found. And that is because if I go to my URLs, I don't have a / after that. So if I click that and refresh that, it should go to question 1. So how's it going? Should display question 1. Questions you have about that? All right.
That's a lot to keep track of, though.
Yep. Yeah, and we're going to keep on repeating this process. So cool. We're done with this portion of it, or the index. Now let's try to actually have it display question 1. So with that, let's go ahead and start with the detail. So we have the question ID. Let's just print that. Actually, we don't even need to print it, but okay. See, we've got the question ID down here is 1. So we have the question ID. Now, how do we go about extracting that specific question from the database? Anybody?
Another select statement.
Yep. Question dot objects dot get, where ID equals question ID. I can do data equals question question.
Data, not date.
Thank you. And instead of this HTTP response, I'm going to return a render, return render. I want it to render the request. I want to render a polls/detail.html file, which I haven't created yet. I'm going to pass in this data object. And I can add other attributes. I can add other keys on here as well. I can add I can make the page dynamic by adding other keys on here. All right. So I want to create a details.html file. So instead of index, I'm going to create a detail.html file. I'm going to do HTML template boilerplate again. Just why not? And in here, I can say H1 detail about question, make that dynamic question.id. And so I just want to emphasize, when you're extracting data from Python and injecting it into into a HTML tag, you need the double brackets. But if you're not within an HTML tag and you're running just basic logic, like for and if statements, it's the single bracket followed by the %sign. So in here, I can say detail about question 1. I'm going to add H2. And instead of question ID, I want it to display the question underscore text associated with that question. And now in here, I want to create another ordered list or an unordered list. And in here, I can, as I mentioned, I'm going to do like a for choice in, where's my models at? If I wanted to grab all the choices from the question, how do I go about doing that? If I was just writing a raw, a Django query and I try to grab all the choices from a question. How do I get from choice? So if I do choice.question, I can also go from question.choices. So in my detail, I can say, hey, for choice in question.choices.all. So you can also do almost like Django queries in here. I'm going to do an N4. Now I'm just going to do a list. Choice dot choice underscore text. Detail. So if I come back here and I do a hard refresh and click, how's it going? Now I get detail about question 1. I get what the question is and my choices. Any questions? What questions do you have about that process?
Why are you using Python injection as opposed to JavaScript in this situation?
Because I can't query a database using JavaScript
Got it.
from here.
Okay.
So it's like how, because I'm using Python to query everything. I'm passing the data into the HTML template as Python code. So I'd have to find some way to convert that Python code into JavaScript code and then using JavaScript inject that. But they've got a cool library called Jinja or Jinja 2 that allows us to write Python code directly in line with HTML.
How do you spell Jinja?
Jinja, or yeah, Jinji, I think. All right.
JINJA2.
So it's like ninja with a J.
Yes, precisely.
Why?
All right. So we've got our detail page. All great. So in my detail page, if I go back, enter, when I click this, how's it going? And it takes me to polls/1. And if I open up my index.polls, I'm like hard coding this, like polls/whatever. But if this were to ever change, it wouldn't know like where to go. So this isn't necessarily a good practice to do that. So remember how I was talking about this name variable or this name that's associated with this view? This is called what is called a named route. So I can refactor this by, instead of going to polls/question ID, I can do some Python injection and going to URL. Hey, it's like, hey, what URL do you want to look at? Polls:detail. So it's saying, hey, in the polls, look for a whatever route the named route is. So polls:detail. And what do you want to pass in there? I want to pass in the question ID. So that question ID is being passed into the path, which then runs that detail view method, comes into here, and it should render the same amount or the same data. Polls. What does that say? Polls is not a registered namespace. So there's a couple ways I can fix that. I can literally just delete that. That should still work. Nope. So what I actually need to do is add an app name in my URLs called polls. And that should fix the issue. Let's see if that worked. Am I missing something? Oh. Question.id. What happened there? So click that, refresh, and now everything is working the same. So this name.index, your name equals index, name equals detail, name equals results. That's just called the named route. And that's so you can make these routes dynamic by looking in the URL, whatever that detail is. And then it runs that, passes this question ID into this path, and it runs this detail method inside the view, comes into here, grabs that question ID, extracts, does a query, grabs a question ID from the, or question from the database, assigns that question to a object, passes that object, and renders the polls.detail.html. That then
That's going a little too fast for me.
okay.
Let me get that index code down. I'm trying to copy that.
All right. Well, you're going to be doing this also afterwards. So you're going to go through this entire tutorial as a group or with your pair programming partner. So that's just what the named route is for. It just allows your URLs to be more dynamic. All right. So now let's go ahead and create, what do we want to create? Polls. Let's go ahead and I guess we can review let's go ahead and see if we can vote on this. So with that, so in here, when I click on one of these are like what I'm selecting. So I need to vote on this. Oh, not HBO Max. Go back. So in my question of how is it going, when I click on one of these, I want it to vote for me. That, hey, not doing so well. Okay, great. So I'm going to need to create a form in here. So inside of my details page, right here, I'm going to go ahead and create a form that allows me to click it and have it submit. So when I click on that list, I need to create a form. And this form needs I'm going to be able to need to, when I click this form or click an entry, like not doing so well, I need to be able to vote for that choice. And then once I click on that, I want it to route me to the results page. So with that, inside my details HTML file, I'm going to create a form that has a method. If I'm updating or if I'm posting something to a database or saving something to a database, which method am I running? Which HTTP method?
Would be posts,
Yep. So what are the three that you kind of use a lot?
get, post, and I don't know what the third one was.
Yep. So post, post request, get request, a put request update, and a delete request. So in this form, I need to have a method called post, and I need to know essentially what am I voting on. So I just want to refresh this to see if this is working. All right. So I've got a form. And let's just make this a little more, instead of having a list, I'm going to make it an input. And the type, I want it to be a radio name equals choice.
What is a radio type? I don't think I've seen that before.
It's the little.
Where you click on the little dot.
Yep.
It's the round button that allows only one choice instead of the square one that allows multiple choices.
Yep.
Ooh, gotcha.
And I'm just going to create like, I don't even think I need an ID for it, but we might need it. I'm going to do label for choice. For loop dot counter. Like so. And then I'm just going to have this be the choice dot choice underscore text. And the ID, yeah, it's actually, it should be pretty much the same thing as this. Just refresh that. So now we've got a radio that we're able to select it. And then after, let's actually get rid of that, the ordered list. There we go. This might be, there we go. Not doing so well, doing okay. Oh, great, great. Why is it? Oh, this should be choice ID. Yeah, my inputs are all messed up. Then ID should be the value should be choice.id. This might be a little bit better. There we go. So that's the input. When I click that little radio, that makes sure that the value is associated with the choice ID. And the ID is just the for loop counter. That's like a built-in for loop dot counter Django. Django has a bunch of built-in tags, filters that you can do a bunch of stuff with regards to using Jinja and everything. And then underneath the form, we're going to have like a submit button. So I'm just going to have an input that has a type of submit and a value of vote, just because. So here, and now I can click vote, and notice when I click vote, I can select something like OK, and then I click vote, and it submits the form, and it tries to make a post request. But it says CSRF verification failed, request aborted. So this is a security measure that ensures that, hey, when this form is submitted, it has like applies a security token to this form, and it allows us to submit the form to the backend. So essentially, when it tries to submit the form to the backend Django is looking for this a CSRF token attached to the form, and to make sure that, hey, this is in fact should be a form that somebody's submitting via the website or the application, and it's approved. So in order to do that, I can do CSRF underscore token that adds a token to that post request. And now if I click enter and I click OK, great. But it doesn't do anything because we haven't hooked it up to anything. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and try to actually vote for something.
Vote for Pedro.
There we go. So I'm just going to indent some of this stuff. I don't like that. There we go. Okay. So each form, I need to kind of know what thing I'm voting for or what question I'm voting for. So with that, I'm going to have an action in here. So if you look at form action, Django, action. Yeah, I can't remember what action does off the top of my head, but it's essentially going to also route me. What do I want to do? Like what method do I want to post this to? So when I click submit, where does it want me to send the data? And I'm going to want to send the data to the vote view method. So I'm going to go to polls, just colon, vote. And I'm going to pass in the question .id to that vote method. All right. What questions do you have so far?
What did that just do?
So when I click submit, it's going to route me to the vote, the vote method in the URL or in the views. So it's going to come over here and it's going to pass essentially this data into this method. And I'm going to have to do some data. I'm going to have to like grab some, essentially, when I click submit, it attaches whatever I voted for to the request. So when it comes over here to the vote method, I'm able to extract what I voted for from this request object. And then I'm able to save that to the database and just do other logic that I need to with that.
All right, I'm trying to figure out the syntax of that polls colon vote.
Polls
question.id.
So this is what a named route is. So the polls colon is associated with this app name. So I can get rid of that. And I should be able to get rid of this. And is my index.html file, have it somewhere? I'll just try to keep it simple. Everything still works. So the URL of vote right here looks for a named route with the name of vote. And then this question ID is also being passed into the URL, and then it's going to /vote, and then it runs this views.vote method.
I'm sorry, but what does that token thing do again?
It's a security measure that says, hey, this form, when it's submitted, it attaches a a randomized token to the form. So when it sends it to Django, Django like verifies, hey, is this form safe to be sent to the backend? And if it has it's called a CSRF token. If it has one, then it's good. If it doesn't have one, then it'll reject whatever's trying to be submitted. It's a security issues for people just trying to randomly submit data to whatever this route is.
So is that a required item or optional?
No, that is required. So if I got rid of that or commented it out and said, great, look, it says forbidden CSRF token, CSRF verification failed. CSRF token is missing or incorrect.
And that's only between like switching or like requesting info or submitting info?
Yeah.
Or data?
Yeah, just when you're submitting information through a form. All right.
Still don't quite get the format of that request line in detail.
This part?
Yeah, it's like URL function or something. Isn't that supposed to be Python?
This is Python. It's saying, hey, look in the URLs. Look for a URL, a named URL called vote, and then pass the question ID into the URL. So it's coming into here, looking for in the URLs file, looking for a name called vote, which it did. This is a named route. It's like, okay, it found one. All right, pass that question ID into that URL and then execute views.vote method. So it comes under here, and now we're in our views.vote method. So once we're inside of our views.vote method, we can do question, or we can extract the question dot objects dot get with the ID of question ID. And now I can print question ID or question. Let's see if this works. If I say not doing okay, click vote. You can see down here, I've got the question. But notice on here, I'm repeating this code on line 13 and 21. If I'm repeating questions or repeating code, I'm going to create a helper method called def get question that takes in a question ID. And it literally will just return question dot objects dot get ID of question ID.
You're missing a dot between objects and get.
Thank you. So now, instead of here, question.objects.get, I can just run get question, pass in that question ID, and I can do the same thing down here.
So what now, that parameter up top again? Was it ID equals?
Yeah, just question ID. ID equals question ID. All right. So now I'm going to try to grab the choice from the request. So if I just print this request, let's see what this request looks like. So if I go back, refresh, and click OK and vote, now I come over here, I've got this post, this WSG request post object. So if it's a post object, I'm just going to do .post on this and just to see what that looks like. So since it's a post request, I'm going to refresh that. Not doing so well. Vote. Now notice this is where that CSRF token comes in. So now I've got a query dict from the post request that has the middleware token, and this is that CSRF token, as well as it has a choice of 3. So I'm able to see which choice I actually made. So if I click back, refresh, click great. So this would be choice 1, I believe. So if I click vote, now I can see I've got this CSRF middleware token. We don't really need to worry about that. And now I've got a choice of 1. So now I actually know I can extract that choice from this request. So I'm going to use a try except here. Try except. And in here, I'm going to add what type of error it is. I'm going to say it's a key error. Probably have to import that. Choice dot does not exist. Nope. And then I'm going to have to do something with that choice. But I'm going to try to extract the selected choice. Selected choice equals question dot choices dot get. And if I can grab, let's look up here. If I can grab the choice from that post request. So I'm going to say, let's just first try to get that selected choice. Request dot post choice, and print the selected choice from that request. It looks like I'm getting an error here because I haven't imported the choice. Let's go there. There we go. So if I refresh and click rate, click vote. So polls vote, that's okay. That's expected because I'm not returning anything in here. But if I look all the way down here, right there in the terminal, I see the selected choice right there is 1. So I can actually question dot choices dot get primary key equals. So I'm literally grabbing that choice from there. Selected choice. So I've got that selected choice. Now, else I can selected choice dot votes. Actually, let's go ahead and just again, let's see what that selected choice looks like from the database. Print selected choice. So this literally should be a choice object now. If I go back and refresh, click great, vote that. So here's my choice object that's being printed out. And that choice, there's currently 0 votes for that. But since I selected it, I want to increase those votes. So I'm just going to have an else statement here. I'm going to say selected choice dot votes plus equals 1. And then I'm going to say selected choice dot save. And then I'm going to return. I can return something. I can like redirect myself somewhere else. But yeah, I'm going to return HTTP response redirect. So after I vote, I want to be redirected somewhere. Redirect. And this HTTP response redirect I need to import up here. Whoop. So after I vote, it's going to redirect me somewhere. I'm also going to need to import Django URLs, import reverse, and send in here. I'm going to reverse, and I'm going to add in. I'm going to go to the results page, and the arguments I'm going to pass in is a tuple, which is with a question .id.
Check the results spelling.
Results. All right. And then instead of, I can mess with that later, but so it's going to reverse. It's going to go to the results. Look for results. I don't know if I have a results thing yet, but we can figure that out. Results. So it took me, should be to display the results for this. So it came over here, results. Ooh. So when I clicked submit, it looked for a name route of vote, came into their named URL called vote, passed in the question ID to the vote URL, is running the vote view method. It's coming into here, running this vote view method. I'm extracting the question from the database. And now I'm extracting the choice I made from the request, from the post request. And I'm setting it to a variable called selected choice. And then I tried that, it worked. Then it comes down to here, this else. Now I'm updating the votes on the selected choice object. Right here, it's one, it's 0. Now it should be 1. And now I'm saving it to the database. And now I'm redirecting myself after it saves to the results page. So it's looking for a results route. Comes over here, looks at results. Some arguments I'm passing in is question ID. So it passes that question ID into results. Results. Now I'm coming over here, looking for the views.results method. Come over here, runs the results view method, passes that question ID, and it should display the results for this question. So in here, let's go ahead and quickly finish this up. So I'm going to do get question by ID. I'm going to pass in the question ID. I'm going to add it data equals question :question. And now instead of an HTTP response that should display results for question 1, I'm going to return render the request polls/results.html, which I haven't created yet, and the data. So now the last thing I need to do is create a results.html file, do some boilerplate. And now I've got, I can say H1 detail about question, do : question.id, H1. Whoop. And now I can say like H2, just display the question text, double brackets to display the question text. And now in here, I can grab all the choices from there. So I can say, I guess I'll make an unordered list again. Do some Python code for choice and question.choices.all. very similar to what I'm doing in the detail page. So I need to do an N4. N4 and end if are very is what you'll need, N4 and if statements. So I'm going to list everything out. I'm going to say, hey, choice text has, has choice dot votes. See what that looks like. If I refresh that. So now you can kind of see how many votes each one has. 0, 0, 1. And I can also add votes, and then you can make this a little dynamic. Choice dot votes colon pluralize. That's a built-in Django tag that you're able to like do some things with. So you can add all this stuff, these different things in here, slice. Anyway, so 0 votes. So notice how the plural, 0 votes, 1 vote. Now if I go back and I vote again, there we go. Doing okay. It's keeping track of all the votes. I'm doing great again. So now it's got 3 votes.
So
Questions? Yep.
as far as the reasoning for all this, so if there's just like display and local storage stuff, then it's pretty much just a front-end application. When you add what we're doing today, then it allows you to access a database with access to more information, right?
Yep. It just makes everything more dynamic. And it's persistent. I can kill this. I can clear local storage. It doesn't matter. I can kill the server, refresh this. Nothing's there. Run that. Refresh that. There we go.
Okay. So where is the database being stored then if you kill the server?
On my local machine. So if I killed the server and I do PSQL polls, select star from what choices? Or whatever it is. No, this would be polls choices. Or what's this one called? I can look in right here. Polls choice. There we go.
Okay.
Where did the polls ID get established? Was that was great was the first one you added, and so.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. When I'm when I think I manually added them.
Kind of weird that it displays these 3, 2, 1 and then it asks the questions in the same 3, 2, 1 sequence. But
yeah. So in that case,
if we wanted to, we could add a column and set a poll sequence and force it.
Yeah, or you can just extract it from the database and in your view, maybe sort it by ID and then display it.
Yeah. What was the reverse in redirect?
So redirect, just this HTTP response redirect, instead of, I think it just redirects you back to just like instead of going to like render a specific results page, I think I could have also done render results like so. Let's see if that would work. But instead of data, it would have been what, question ID, question. Let's see what question ID. So the results, what does it need? Question, colon, question. I think that may still do the same thing. Oh. But yeah, it just redirects you to a different route.
So is that maybe gonna have us go back to a previous point on our browser stack so that we don't keep just adding things in our history?
Yeah, I mean, that might be how it works. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, that kind of makes sense to me. So if I click that and I click, great. Same thing. All right.
What was the quick key that you did there for like the redo, like opposite of Control Z?
I'm sorry,
You went like undo and then you went back. What was the quick key for that?
the undo.
Yeah, when you were doing your code, it looked like you did Control Z to undo the action that you did, and then you clicked one button to.
Oh, to go back?
Yeah.
So it's Control Z to go back and Control Shift Z to undo.
Thank you.